am going to apologize in advance because it is a snow day here, much like many of you are probably experiencing. So it's not, I don't have any quiet, insular place to do this right now. Um, that said, got lots of good information, and I will continue to be available to you after today, as will your project officer. So there are lots of places to receive support. So one of the things I was trying to decide as I was organizing this was if we should start more with the program measures or with the how to part of it. What I used to do is start with the program measures and go to the how to. And I always expected that many people would get off and I would just be left with the people who were newer to the program and had a new project. But what I found was that was not the case. Everyone stayed on. And so I thought, oh gosh, I wonder which is better to start with. So I'm going to continue to do it the old way. I'm going to start with the GEPRA measures and go on to more of the nuts and bolts how to. Please do know you're welcome to jump off at that point if you've been doing this for years and years. And I like to make a joke there, insert a joke and say, I'm looking at you, Brent Garrett. I think, was Brent our first leadership award winner, John?
I believe he was.
He was.
Oh, thank you. I love it that there are other people who have been around as long as we have. So we appreciate Brent so much. And, he's one of those people who's been doing this for years, but still seems to stay for the rest of it. So if you're like Brent Garrett and you just can't get enough of the how to, you're welcome to stay on at that point. But I'll also make a note to you to let you know that we are getting into the more how to of the APR that is generalizable across all of the Department of Ed and especially OSEP. We require annual performance reports for every grantee, every discretionary grantee, I should say. We do have formula grantees as well. All right, with that, let's get into the meat of today. And I did want to give you a heads up that we have a survey coming up, and so we'll be asking for you to give your feedback about program measure one. So just to let you know that we will be requesting that. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And feel free to ask questions along the way. I also have places where I will stop to ask if you have questions, and you can put them in the chat at any time. And then John will let me know that those are there. All right, so this is the SPDIG specific guidance for the APR. Again, I'll do the nuts and bolts afterward. And so I want to, some of you have already seen the GEPA results from last year. I'll just go over those quickly. So these are the Government Performance Results Act measures that the Center to Improve Project Performance, also known as CIP, reviews for us and gives us the results for. If you have not received your individual results yet, please connect with your project officer and you all can have that meeting. We've had a little bit of shakiness, right? We had the furlough and then came back and all kinds of things were happening. And so myself or the other project officers may have overlooked that, and we can certainly remedy it. I'm going to talk about the program measure reporting strengths and where things may be a little bit more challenging for projects. I'll prepare you with the APR deadlines and the guidance. And then I want to know from you if there are topics that you would like to discuss or guidance on. And so throughout the webinar, please let us know what those topics are. And I'm going to give you a little heads up. We're going to have a discussion coming up on the topics of training and coaching, with the main question for discussion being, what do we get out of separating the two of those, and what might be challenging about it now, say with using modules, etc. So training and coaching, having those two components separate in your evidence-based professional development worksheet. So that will be an upcoming discussion. All right, so a couple learning targets for today. I want you to feel prepared to complete your evidence-based professional development worksheet. And I also want you to know where to get resources. And of course, meet myself, other project officers are also your resources on this. So I am hoping, my intention is that as a result of today, you'll have a better sense of SPDIG specific expectations and the resources that will help you meet those expectations. The SPDIG theory of action, very simplified, is that when you provide good professional development, and in our definition, that includes coaching, right? It's not just training, because I know some people call it PD as training. If you have good professional development that you're providing, you will increase intervention implementation, which will then improve child outcomes. So another way of saying that, you have evidence-based professional development, then personnel you work with, they improve their skills, increase the ability to use your program or practices, and then the children they work with improve their outcomes. This is the APR calendar. Some of it is relevant to new grantees. The April 15th deadline is not. So we've received your continuation package, which, it's not really a package anymore, APR directions, and it's got lots of hyperlinks. We're now having our APR how-to webinar. If you are an ongoing grantee, like this is not your first year, then you will provide your draft of your program measures. Just your status charts are necessary at that point, and the data that you will provide for them. You email those to your project officer on or before April 15th, and then they will give you feedback. We don't need your explanations. We just really need the status chart. And the reason why we do that is because if we send on APRs to SIP to review your program measures and you're missing some kind of data or it's not clear, then they're going to have to kick it back, which means you'll have to upload another APR. So that's more work for you, more work for the project officer, just easier to do this more as a Word document, email back and forth, quickly review that. Of course, we learned that the hard way because we used to send on some reports that didn't meet the needs of SIP. May 1st is when your APR will be due in G5. So for new grantees, you will be sending your project officer your draft project and program measures before that April 15th. The date you'll send that to your project officer is determined between you and them, not myself. And then it's an iterative process. We try to start it as early as possible due to the fact that you're still learning as a new grantee. Even if you've had grants before with us, this is a new project and you will need to be working with your project officer to determine the best performance measures for your grant. So the GEPRA SIP, and SIP is a contractor that reviews your program measures from just within your APR. So this is when they're reviewing various of the program measures. So in your implementation year 2, and the way that we describe implementation year, we operationally define it by saying this is the second year you've had about 2 years of providing professional development to whoever the personnel you're serving. You've had about 2 years of providing professional development. At that point, they start to review your fidelity related program measure. So that's in year 2. Doesn't really matter for you because you're providing those data all the way through. At first you're just going to set your target, then you're going to start providing data once you have them. That's always going to be in your APR. It's just that we won't send it on to the contractor until you have had 2 years of providing professional development. Implementation year 3, 4, and 5, the contractor reviews your worksheet, the fidelity measure, and the cost measure. So those are program measures 1, 2, and 3. Your final report, the contractor reviews all of that and program measure 4. Now, something that we tried last year was saying, if you're in a no-cost extension, the evidence-based professional development worksheet was not necessary. I think it's something good to talk with your project officer about. There are instances where you're just kind of finishing things out. There are also instances where you're actually doing all the PD work you've been doing the entire time. So I think as much as it was easy to say this, I think it still needs to be a conversation because different projects look different in a no-cost extension year. So any questions? I know that there's a lot here. So any questions about what I've said so far? All right.
Oh, actually, I have a question.
Sure.
As far as if you are in a no-cost extension, the program measures, are those still due to you by April 15th?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, again, I mean, I know I'm your project officer, so talk to me about it. It
Okay.
is just a little bit of it's dependent because some folks in a no cost extension are going to provide their final performance report before December 30th and close their grant out, in which case they don't have to have a May report. So then it kind of chains backwards. So it is more of an individual conversation, Sherry. But good question.
Oh,
And Jennifer, you may not see,
Leslie has her hand
but
up.
Leslie has her hand
Yeah.
up. Thanks.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Leslie.
Yeah. And I guess mine was simpler because we are going to be delivering services all the way through the end of September. Um, and so I wasn't clear in that no cost extension whether we needed to do this continuing report um, this
Yeah,
year
so
about
the
New
the
Year's Day.
rule the rule of thumb for the no cost extension annual performance report in May
Mhm.
is if you will be able to turn in a final report and draw down all funds by December 30th,
Mhm.
you don't need to upload a May APR.
Okay.
I, if I had a dime for every time someone thought they'd be able to do all that by December 30th and weren't able to do it, I'd be a pretty wealthy government person. So I would tend to just provide that May APR because it's going to make your life easier and, so you don't have to do an ad hoc all of a sudden. But it's up to you if you really think that you can finish everything out. If your project is looking at their finances and they know they'll have spent down by then and they'll have finished everything and they can do the report by December 30th, then yes, you can skip that May APR.
Okay. Thanks. I'll talk to the state folks.
Okay. Thanks, Leslie. Other questions? Okay. So overview of the GEPRA data, and this was so the calendar for that is that we receive your APRs in early May. Even though project officers have looked over your program measures before, they're going to look them over again, and then we give the APRs to that are in implementation year 2 and beyond. We give those to SIP, and then SIP reviews and provides their final, should I call it final results in September. And so then we provide you the overall data and then the individual projects after that. So this is last year's from your previous APR. And measure 2.1 is program measure 1. So that is your evidence-based professional development worksheet being reviewed. Um, so and that is it looks weirder than I expected it to. So let's look at this for a second. Okay. Oh, these are the overall. Yeah, let's just look at the individuals. I don't know. That came out. It looked normal to me until I saw it close up. All right. So this is for program measure 1. So this is evidence-based professional development. And then this shows we started collecting true data in 2016. We had created the measures before that. We were doing baseline and then started in 2016. And then 2025 was the last time we collected data from you. And so the target was that 82% of projects would meet the target for their year of implementation. And those are different targets. 95.8%, so just about 96% of the projects met their target for their implementation year. So we exceeded that target. These are the initiative years each of the projects were in. So there were, there were, sorry, I'm going to move my image around, not doing it well. Okay, so there were 8 projects that were in implementation year 2, and all 8 of them met their target. And then you can go down to year 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and you can see only one project did not meet their target. So out of 24 initiatives that were reviewed, this was what we found. So we did very well. When I say we, you, that's the royal we. So congratulations. And you can see this shows up too when you look. So let me explain this a little bit. A1 is that selection section, A1 and 2, I should say, are the selection section. B1 through 6, that's about training. C1 through 3, that's coaching. D1 through D5, performance assessment. So think database decision making. And E1 and 2 is the administrative support, the changes that you make in policies, that kind of thing. And then the zeros up top are those projects, initiatives that scored a 1. And then the second row is those that scored a 2. The third row scored a 3. Fourth row scored a 4. So you can see we're very heavy in scoring a 3, fewer generally in the 4s, except for there were some exceptions. The first training component, 17 received a 4 in that. The first coaching component, 11 received a 4. First data component, 12. So really, everyone did really, really well. Usually I focus in on certain components where it seemed like people were having more challenges, didn't score as well. Don't have any of those this year. The most 2s we had was three initiatives with 2s. So doing really well in this section. We have exemplar reports and exemplar worksheets. One of those exemplars was Arkansas, where SIP reviewed their worksheet and said, this should be used as an exemplar, which makes it very easy for me to know what to put up. So you can look at Arkansas's worksheet, review it, let me or your project officer know if you have any questions about that. But some folks said that the rubric wasn't enough. The rubric that shows you what a good description might look like in that, what might earn a 3 or a 4. Some people thought that wasn't enough. So just go ahead and look at the exemplar worksheets in that case. You will be attaching your worksheet to your APR. And I always recommend having somebody who doesn't know your project well review your worksheet to just see if they think that all the different requirements that you're supposed to be responding to, that it was clear that you're responding to them and what you were saying. Any questions about the EBPD worksheet? Okay. So here is our program measure 1 survey. Hopefully you all remember when University of Denver, I should say, we had doc students who reviewed program measure 1. They reviewed the what we use for the rubric, what we use for the worksheet, some of your responses, and they gave us feedback on what we could improve, and really great feedback, lots of information. And then what happened after that is our evaluators, they also call themselves analysts. There's an evaluators work group that does fantastic work together. And they looked at University of Denver's recommendations and then dug a little bit deeper as folks who are experienced in this work and thought, okay, we need to know this, this, and this. And so they've been giving me good information to go on and good pointers so far. But there were a few areas where they thought we really need to hear from others what they want. So again, this is an evaluators work group. They don't have like the SPDIC coordinators or the project directors or other personnel on it. And so we do need your feedback in these areas so that we can provide guidance for all projects in recommended ways to do program measure 1. So these are the questions. John, the first 2, John is going to ask you through a Zoom poll. And the third one is for you to respond to in the chat. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to do so. And I will answer any questions you have as you're responding.
I don't think you're able to see it from your view, Jennifer, but we've got about 2/3 of the people have responded so
Okay.
far. So I'll continue to keep it open and let the responses come in. Thank you, everybody who is responding to the poll. Of course, the first poll is a single choice. The second choice is multiple choice. Check all that apply. And then in both cases, there's an option for other. If you select other, please put your idea of what other or your specific case of what other is directly into the chat.
Thank you, John.
John, I think I missed the second question. Sorry.
Oh, that's all right. Do you see it there? Are you able to see it, Kristen?
Uh-uh.
Oh, so if you scroll down in the poll, both questions are one below the other.
I think I submitted it before I got to 2.
I did the same thing.
Same thing.
Do you want to, I don't know, John, what do you think? Should we just do it in the chat or should you
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and put it into the chat?
just
I'm
whatever
not,
your response is? I
yeah,
guess.
whatever your response would be for number 2 there. And number 2, of course, is what is your state's process for completing the EBPD? It looks like the responses have slowed down to the poll. So I will leave that open just for a minute more, but I assume people are starting to think about the third question on Jennifer's slide here, and that's what do you wish would be changed about the EBPD? And of course, that's open-ended, and so you would write that in the poll or in the chat as well. All right, I haven't seen any new responses to the poll come in for about a minute now, so I'm going to go ahead and end that poll. Jennifer, do you want to share these results now, or?
Yeah, that'd be great. All right, so we see who is the team member that completes the EBPD. It was a single choice, so it looks like project manager number 1, internal evaluator number 2, project administrators number 3. And then if I scroll down, and then other, and then what is your state's process for completing the EBPD? Check all that apply. And the most popular was we start in January or early February. It's completed by a group. We each take part and complete it. And then it's completed by the SEA and reviewed by our external evaluator was the third most popular choice. All right. Any questions and we'll be reviewing the chat later to analyze that. I don't think I can do that as quickly. Any questions or other thoughts or anything we didn't ask you that you would love to say something about program measure 1? Oh, and I'm sorry, I didn't realize I wasn't on camera. That's real more concise. Okay. Okay. To Kristen's point, I think it's a great point, and it's true for both sides. When it's very long, it's more challenging, right? We are going to try to take out the sections that have caused the I should say the requirements that have seemingly required projects to duplicate information in different, in various places. So we're going to work on that. It's not going to be right now. And we may be working on now, but we're not going to give you anything new to respond to, right? You're responding to the same thing that was last year. We will give you a lot of time to get used to any changes before you need to respond to it next year. Because as folks were saying, you do start to complete it in January. And the evaluators group is just now coming up with things for me to work on. And so we're getting it together, but it will be ready for next year. We are planning on having the same number of components and the same components, right? Like, so it'll be 16 components, they'll be the same ones. So what will be changing is the requirements within them for you to respond. And you'll also have a chance to review the draft and to give input on that. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, great. So the basics will remain the same, but hopefully we will be cutting down on repeating responses and anything that just wasn't feeling very meaningful to people. We good to go? Okay, great. Thank you, Holly. All right. So program measure 2 is improving implementation. And that's the formal language is below. And so if we look at our scores, again, 2016, way back when was when we first started to collect real data. And then 2025 was last year. And so our target was 60% of initiatives would have met their own target for improving implementation. And what we see is about 65% did so. So we exceeded that target. Congratulations. That is not a given. We kind of jump around, which is to be expected, right? Things change in the context you work within. You learn over time. Lots of things go on. This is a very dynamic measure. These are the different implementation years of the initiatives, and you can see how many met their target, how many did not. Seemingly, things get better as you go on and you're learning and you meet your targets better. So you can see the percentages at the bottom. So as always, be clear about the fidelity measure you use. Ensure that the reviewers and SIP looks at one APR in time. They don't look at your previous APRs. They don't compare it. They're not looking for trend lines on their own. They are just looking at what you give them. If you have multiple initiatives, they might choose one initiative one year and another initiative another year because they randomly choose those. So you just have to be, every year, you just have to be clear, put it in your APR, what the fidelity measure is. If your fidelity measure is a self-assessment, so meaning that, say, like someone implementing in a school is using an implementation tool where they just respond to it themselves, then somebody or somebody's needs to check on 20% of those fidelity assessments and ensure that they have the same result. This is a little bit informal. This is not research, but the basic idea is self-assessments do not always match with external assessments, and you're trying to get it as close as possible. Setting next year's targets. So you already have decided on your target for this year last year. And as you're collecting data, you might see, okay, we set our target way out there. We're not ever going to be able to meet it. We need to be a little bit more honest about what we can accomplish in these settings with this work, etc. Or maybe it's too easy. So think about next year's targets, set that in conversation with your project officer. Any questions about these guidelines for program measure 2? Okay. All right. So this is challenging. I know this idea of intervention, we still call it implementation fidelity because intervention fidelity isn't used as widely understood. But basically, we're trying to get as close to the children with disabilities whose improvement we want to see. We're trying to get as close as possible. I have one new project that is specifically working with principals, which is completely allowed. And they're looking at improving inclusion through working with these principals. It's great. And we're trying to figure out what that fidelity measure looks like, right? So that's more challenging. There are going to be situations where it's not an easy, like, oh, we're working with early childhood, early intervention providers, and they're going to be doing this. It's not always as simple as that. That's why you talk with your project officer about it. But the reason we got to this point was because as much as fidelity is important at all the levels of your SPDIG system, if you don't know what's going on directly with the children, you don't really know anything, right? You got to get into that classroom, into that home setting where intervention is being provided, wherever it happens to be. You have to know what's happening, or else it's this black box and you can't really expect child outcomes to be improved. So just be thinking that way. Again, conversation with the project officer. I can come into the conversation if I'm not your project officer, if that's helpful. And we can figure it out. It's program evaluation, not research. We do the best we can together. And this is getting a little bit more into systems versus interventions. Some of you provide systems coaching or team coaching and instructional coaching, which is awesome. I think that's the gold standard, is to have both. We want both things to happen. But again, we want to know what's happening for the child. So if collecting data is challenging, we can talk about that. We can talk about if you could sample, if you could look at something common that is, something essential that is common across all the settings you're working in. You can think about benchmarks. There's lots of different ways. I don't think anyone's ever used the Z, what's it called? Z, is it statistics? It's where you have you're counting different, you got kind of like apples and oranges and you're trying to figure out what's the same about it. So there's lots of different ways to do it. We can work with a statistician if we need to, but we'll figure it out together if it is challenging for you. So this is about setting those targets. They need to be challenging but achievable. All right. And then this is just a reminder what we just talked about, but being clear about whether it's a self-assessment or an external observation. This is something that I have 2 slides on because sometimes it trips SIP up a little bit, knowing what's what. Sometimes it is clear and whatever, for whatever reason they missed that you said that. Sometimes it needs to be more clear. Lots of conversations about that. All right. So evaluate, Z score. Thank you very much. Okay. I knew someone would help me. All right. So any questions about program measure 2, which is improving implementation or intervention fidelity? All right. Glad I was clear. But, if you want to, you can add something in the chat later or reach out directly to me. Program measure 3, this is our cost measure. Cost measures are required of every discretionary grant in the government, or that's supported by the government. I worked with evaluators, with project personnel, with folks in the department to try to make it as meaningful as possible. That said, if anyone can ever think of anything more meaningful, let me know and we could consider changing it. All right, so back from 2016 again, you can see the target has remained the same, and we have come very close this last year. This is one we usually do pretty well on, often exceeding the target, but didn't quite exceed the target. Honestly, I'm not exactly sure why that is. I would need to do some further looking, and I wasn't too worried about it because we were very close. So you can see 20 met their target, 5 did not, so it doesn't take much not to meet that. I should stop and say, any questions about program measure 4, which is the ongoing assistance you provide after training. So this often looks like coaching, it looks like mentoring, more support to ensure that full implementation takes place. Any questions about that? Okay. So program measure 4, this is a new one. We will really be collecting this data mainly this year because so many grants that started in 2020 have no cost extension. So we're still collecting the data. So we don't really have our true baseline yet on how we're going to do on this. Um, so you have to determine the child outcome that is the direct result of your intervention. Again, that connection. You set initial targets and provide any data that you have, even though the contractors won't look at it until the final year of your project. We still are going to provide you some feedback on whether your program measure and the information you give for it are right. So we want to make sure you know what you're doing and we're aware of what you're doing. So rubric B just gives you, here are the pieces of information, here are the data you need to provide for your program measures. It's just it's exactly what the contractor looks at. So we're just making it transparent to you. This is what they're looking for. And there's also an APR fillable form, if that would be helpful for you. We originally had that made for project officers, but you can use it as well just to ensure that you have provided all the information you need. Welcome to share that with your project officer if you'd like. Large available balances, we don't know yet if it's more than 70% of your annual budget that folks will land on. It can change a little bit, but that's what's in your dear colleague letter, so we'll just go with that. So that means 1 year's budget. If you are receiving 500,000 a year and you have more than 70% of that 500,000, that would be considered a large available balance. It now starts in your first year of your grant all the way until you've done your 5th year of your grant. And then after your 4th year, I should say, we don't look at large available balances anymore. It's all in your account. It's yours. We don't know if we'll do the SF 424 financial form, but if you see it I think it's automatically placed in your G5 performance monitoring APR file. Please don't just automatically complete it. You will be alerted if you need to complete an SF 424, which is a financial form. So you don't need to do it. You may need to, but I have not heard that you will. You don't have to do it. APR section B is your budget and a strong description of reasons you've not been able to spend down your funds, and perhaps even more important, your plans to spend those funds going forward are critical. Any questions about large available balances, section B, financial form? Okay, well, I'm glad that was clear. Obviously, you can still ask questions. I'm going to change to the nuts and bolts part of the webinar. And so if you've been doing an APR for years and you don't need to hear what an executive summary is one more year, then please feel free to get back almost 20 minutes of your day. Whoever else is interested in hearing it, go ahead and get into that. All right, APR support. So we want to make sure that you have this overall nuts and bolts and a few resources that might be helpful. And also I'm here for any questions that you have. So we were already talking about we were already talking about no cost extensions, that there is some flexibility if you're providing a final report by December 30th, and why we need an APR. So the due date is by 4:30 p.m. Eastern on Friday, May 1st. These are the different sections that you'll have, and I'm going to go into each of them. So this is, you will have these slides. I updated them a bit today, and so I'm going to send them to John. So you'll have these slides that you can look at. So you can look at them a little bit more carefully. I don't want to read every single word, but hopefully having a picture of what things look like and a little bit more description is going to be helpful for you. And then stop me too if you want a little more explanation of a specific section. So this is how you get into your performance reports and how you edit the report. So cover sheet example, looking at time, I think we are going to not do this for now, but know that your exemplar reports on the APR webpage and SIG Network, that they have cover sheets as part of them. So you can look at those. All right, so this is about the reporting period, and we do get lots of questions about this. The reporting period, if you're in your first year, I think everyone started October 1st, and so it would be October 1st, 2025 through February 28th, 2026 is your reporting period. If you're in year 2 or later, it would be from March 1st to February 28th. You have some wiggle room. It's really not that important, except for it's helpful for people to have just the parameters around the dates. For section B, describe funds expended during the budget period, which is for a new grant October 1st through it's the same basically until February 28th. So this is cover sheet directions. We do need to know if you're claiming indirect costs and what your indirect cost rate is. You are using an unrestricted indirect cost rate. It's a little bit confusing because the PDP grants, also known as the Personnel Development Program, we are the state personnel, sorry, what am I getting wrong there? Getting something wrong about the PDP, but that's about preparing personnel. We're about the state personnel development grants. They have a restricted rate. We do not. And so that's why sometimes people are confused. The unrestricted rate means you just use the rate that your agency typically uses. All right. So we have questions 10 and 11 as NA for you. Question 12, follow the directions. You need a verifiable digital signature on a PDF. And this is the description of how to do it. I was talking with the project earlier, they said, you all could really improve this. It's a little bit challenging. And so I'm going to talk to our front office and OSEP about that. So executive summary, there's some general instructions on what to include. It's not your project abstract. It is what you've accomplished so far. And when you're new, maybe you haven't accomplished a lot, but you can talk about what you have done and maybe what you're planning on doing. So the cover sheet, again, you have your exemplars to look at. All right, so these are the section A, the status charts, what I consider the meat of things. And you have multiple exemplar reports, as we talked about, and there's a hyperlink there on page. And there are both exemplars of new projects measured, just plain old measures, and then new projects APRs, and then ongoing projects APRs. We don't yet have a final report exemplar. I know you all have been waiting for a while because the 2020 grantees are just now finishing up. And that's when we changed our program measures a bit. And so I don't want to give you old program measures in a final report. That'd be a little bit confusing. So thank you for waiting. Final report is really just an annual performance report with your final data. There's no magical quality that makes it a final report except for it's your last report. So project status chart is section A, and it's where you tell us about the progress you are making in meeting your objectives. It should include program and project measures, and you update it annually. I do want to say one thing that's not on here. I say annually, you should give us all your measures, and maybe you don't have final data to report and you just describe that in the explanation section. But I find it's much easier to just get everything in the status chart and then report as you have the data. So our program goals are integrated into our program measures. So you want to provide effective professional development that improves the ability of personnel to use evidence-based practices, that in turn improves outcomes for children with disabilities. We had looked at that theory of action earlier. And your project objectives are what you set out in your application. So if you're a new grantee, look at your application. What did you say you'd do? That's what you're going to put in your APR. Check it out with your project officer. Make sure it's going to serve you and be understandable to others. And then performance measures is just how you measure your progress toward meeting your objectives. So there are the GEPR are the program measures, and you'll write program in the description of what the measure is in the status chart. And the program measures we provide to Congress through our budget office. This is how they know that the money they've given for a program, what's happening as a result of it. And then the project measures are specific to your project. Developing a strong project performance measure, action oriented, should be specific, describe what's being measured, who will achieve the change, how much change is expected, when will it take place, and how will it be measured. So some of that's in the performance measure itself, some of that is in the explanation below it, but this is what makes a strong measure. So here are our program measures that we just reviewed in some length, if you want to see them all in one place. So we've got program measure 1, evidence-based professional development, you provide a worksheet for. Measure 2 is about improving implementation, and you talk about what your measure is and if it's a self-assessment or external assessment, and it needs to be as close to the child as possible, those things we talked about. Program measure 3 is how you use your funds to provide follow-up support. So after that initial training, what are you doing to make sure folks know how to use the practices, they're doing it well, and then continuing to improve? And then child outcomes, we are all about improving outcomes for children with disabilities. So that's why that is measure 4. So explanation of progress, I've been talking about that a little bit. You're going to be describing the data there, and a little bit of background, like maybe you had planned to be able to collect data, you weren't able to, you explain it there, or the population changed a bit. So just, anytime you provide data, you need to explain it, and that's where it happens in the APR. But do know in your directions for your APR that you'll find in your Dear Colleague letter, it's a hyperlink to it. Those directions provide specific questions for you to answer about your data. So please do look those over. This is a description of how you do it. So you can always come back if you need support for that. Save frequently, always a good idea in G5, whatever you're doing. If you expect to have any unexpended funds, explain why, provide an estimate, and indicate how you plan to use the unexpended funds in the next budget period. We use this, we the project officers use this to say, this is how much money they need for the continuation. Do they need the full amount? Do they need less money maybe? So that's really important that you have that information for us. This is your own choice. This is optional, but you may want to use a table of expenditures that looks like this. And so it has, these are just, from your original budget form that you turned in with your application. These are those different sections. And then available amount for the current year, amount that you expended. So you actually drew it out of G5. What have you encumbered or committed that you have not yet drawn down? And then as a result, what will your unexpended funds be? And any comments you have to the right. This means that when it comes time to describe large available balances, we have all the information we need already, and we probably don't have to bother you at that point in time. So fiscal responsibility, we do expect funds to be used, your annual funds to be used annually. There are no cost extensions. There have been talks from grantees concerned that no cost extensions won't be allowed anymore. We haven't heard that. I guess it's a possibility, but I have not heard that myself. But you still need to be attempting to spend your annual funds in that year. Here is an example. This does not have that chart filled out that I just showed you, but just as kind of an overview of the basics. So our current available balance is 585,000 in G5. We'll draw down 60,000 for coaches, 70,000 for training, and that will I added an extra $455,000 remaining. And then we have additional administrative costs, 40,000. We'll have a balance of 415,000 by the end of the budget period, September 30th. But then we'll be holding our in-person conference, and we expect to use that, this is all made up. I did not pull it from anyone's, obviously. But this is just kind of that summary overview. And then you can also provide the money totals in the budget chart. So here are some OSEP resources that you have available to you, and these are all hyperlinked. There's guidance for project performance measures from SIP, the same contractor that reviews your program measure data, and then making project measures meaningful, OSEP performance measurement information and resources, and administering ed grants. So this is just some overall training on more of that budget section of things. So your project officer is going to give you feedback. You don't even have to ask, you're just going to get it. But again, by April 15th, could be before your program measures. If you're an ongoing grant, new grants, your project officer needs your performance and your project and program measures as soon as possible. Office hours, we will continue to have office hours. I'm sorry I used up all our time today, so I didn't get to have office hours today, but we will have, John, when's our next office hour?
Let me look at the calendar here real quick. Our next office hour is February 24th. That's a Tuesday again at 1 p.m. Eastern.
Great. So I'm going to look at the chat, and then I'm going to show you SIG Network, what things look like. Okay, good. And so a few people had to leave. All right, so I'm going to navigate it so you know exactly how to do it when you need to do it. And do let me know if there's anything that you wish I'd gotten into or anything that could have been specified with more detail. Go ahead and let me know that. I keep on trying to get back to. So when you go to signetwork.org, let's do it that way. Up here, you find grants management, which, by the way, the no-cost extension form to request your no-cost extension can be found there. And then you go to APR and program measures, and there's a little bit of a description, how we use your APR data. Again, I talked about the program measures data go to Congress and our budget office in U.S. Department of Education. We as project officers learn how you're doing, what you're doing, where you might need a little support. We also share it with other SPDIG projects with your permission, of course. All right, so old webinars were up from last year, and now we'll have January 2026 up there, and we'll have the slides updated. This is guidance for each of the program measures from us, from OSEP. And then this is from our contractor, just to say, hey, here's some things to think about as your contractor who reviews your data. Webinar tools, there's the instructions. And then I talked about the instructions for the kinds of data information to provide. And then rubric B, I talked about the APR fillable form, the worksheet that you fill out, and the rubric. There was a webinar where our contractors talked about how you can improve your program measure submission, if you'd like to watch that. And we have continuation reports from Idaho, New Jersey, Maryland. Arkansas just gave us approval to share theirs since they have the worksheet that the contractor said, hey, this is an exemplar. We also have from Maine a few years ago at this point. And then these are just measures for program and project that a new project put together in 2020. But it was just so nicely put together and so easy to understand. We've kept that as an example. And an evaluation manual from South Dakota that might be helpful as you're putting together your evaluation. It's really easy to understand. You could share it with family members, you could share it with teachers, you could share it with other folks who partner with you, and then some Fidelity resources. All right, we have 2 minutes for questions. What didn't I cover? What was confusing? Anything?
Jennifer, this is Tammy, licensed in Montana. I too slow to raise my hand, so I'm just going to speak up.
Sure.
I always struggle. I think it's the program measure around funding for professional development activities. Really with just like the numerator denominator, like the denominator, thinking of evaluation costs as well as some of that. So is there anything when we're calculating that you can provide guidance on? Like, is the denominator out of your total grant awards like spent that year, or are there certain things that are not really considered, that are sort of not part of the denominator?
There would be things that are not part of the denominator, but it is mushy, it's or squishy, whatever your Y word is, your adverb. Adjective. Now I'm thinking grammar. Anyways, so what I recommend to projects is that you think about what is everything that goes into providing professional development for our projects. And remember, you had to respond to section B, other use of funds, where you talked about various other things you do with your grant that are not professional development necessarily. So think about everything you do for professional development. It does include evaluation. There's probably some administrative support, right? There's probably some resources you use. There may be you rent a building, you provide stipends, etc. All of that goes into the denominator. And then the numerator is anything like coaching, mentoring, doing the Fidelity, taking the Fidelity data and training on how they can provide, you know what I mean? So like all those are aspects that go into your professional development, your evidence-based professional development specifically. That the denominator and the numerator being those things that ensure after initial training, you all know what you're doing. You're continuing to improve. We're going to keep on supporting you as you keep on improving. Does that help at all?
Yeah, I think so. Because I think separate from like if it was a one and done training, that would not be in your numerator. But if it's part of that sustainable long term, like continued support for PD, that may. And I think it's just I've struggled on that one with like director salaries or certain things like in terms of are they traveling to deliver one-time PD or are they traveling to deliver coaching? And this gets kind of like I get hung up on the numerator denominator details of what's in, what's out. And I did in doing the application think about that, like you said, the part B other costs, but just kind of trying to figure out what are we looking for here? And I think that's again that we're looking for evidence of funding for sustainable activities versus one-time PD.
Yeah. Yep. I think that's a really nice way to summarize it because that is what we're all about, right? We are about improving results for children with disabilities by doing this deep professional development. And that's why it was a meaningful cost measure, but it's not a perfect cost measure, right? It's what we've got at this moment, but I would love to continue to think about how we could make it even more meaningful. All right. Well, thanks everyone. We are very open to your feedback again about how we could improve this webinar and any discussions you want to have with a small group or larger group. We will have that conversation about training and coaching, which does relate to what you're talking about, Tammy. And then we will be working on reducing duplication in the requirements of the EBPD worksheet. All right. Thanks, John, for organizing us. Thank you for the evaluators who helped me get together the survey questions, specifically Beth and Jason. And we will see you all in February for the Virginia presentation of what they are doing related to sustainability in their grant. Okay.
Thank you, Jennifer.
You're welcome.